So if you've noticed, I haven't made a gaming video in a while, and it's simply because it's just so hard to be interested in gaming and pulp culture nowadays. Maybe this is a good thing, because it either lets you focus on what's outside of gaming, or it gives budding game developers who don't fall into the trap I'm about to talk about a chance to shine. And now with the rise of Unity and the Unreal Engine, which are free along with tools such as Multimedia Fusion and Game Maker, just about anyone with a computer running Microsoft Windows can make a multi-million selling game that developers will want to port to game consoles for you. But at the same time, there's been a trend in this trashy culture, and it's one that results in infantilistic grown men, or man-children as they're called online, who obsess over the past so much, mainly their elementary, middle school, and maybe high school years, along with the first game console they got. To them, they were the best years of their short lives, mainly because the only responsibilities they had were homework and maybe cleaning their room, and nothing more. No bills to pay, no struggle to get a job, no need to actually cook food, none of that. And of course, there was no person with a silver spoon ranting about how they worked hard to get something when they met somebody and they were given an internship at a big tech company instead of actually having to work for it. You don't have to deal with any of that when you're a kid. And if they had a helicoptering mom at the time, they would walk into school every time their little sweetheart did a bad thing to defend him and say he could do no wrong to the teachers. And what happens to these people, especially the ones where their parents cling to them and have to orbit them and try to control every aspect of their life, even well into their 20s? Well, those people grow up to be sap failures at life, who've never accomplished anything, and who down themselves in fast food and hot pockets and video games. For example, here's a good example. Look at Chris Chan. Sure, mentioning him or her, however you want to refer to Chris, is kind of overdone at this point, considering how he's an internet legend, but at the same time his life is somewhat interesting due to the fact that just about everything that has happened in his life has been both a how-to guide on what not to do on the internet and somewhat of a prototype for the modern millennial. Chris Chan idolizes his high school years as the best years of his life. From begging for a high school reunion with the kids he went to building a Lego model of his high school. As his life around him gets sadder and more depressing while it continues to crumble or literally burn down, just like that house fire he had. His life has also been marked by parents who shielded him from real life, blatant consumerism after winning a contest as a kid, and an addiction to video games. But you know what's depressing? Knowing that there are a lot of people out there just like Chris Chan. And while most aren't as bad as he is, they exhibit a lot of his traits. While I could go on and on about each individual trait in Chris's life, I think the one most important here is their addiction to that same time period in their lives. This seems to apply to pulp culture and video games a lot, and it's quite common to find someone who thinks that the 90s were so much better, that modern video games are dumb, and that the Wii U, 3DS, and Nintendo Switch are the only good modern video game consoles. Media companies know this as well, and they want to make money from these people. With movies, it's why there's sequels to even movies nobody asked for, remakes, and movies like Scott Pilgrim or Ready Player One that cash in on nostalgia with the writing of a fan fiction or a Kid Rock song. You know, when he was writing country songs about listening to other country songs. And this trend affected gaming too, and no such console demonstrates this better than the Xbox 360. See, the 360 didn't have the longest lifespan of any console, with the console in production from 2005 to 2016, with sports games still coming out for it to this day, at least when this video was uploaded. However, the 360 did last through massive changes in technology. The original 360 had no HDMI port and was released at a time when Motorola Razrs and Nextels were popular, when Windows XP was the newest version of Windows, when CRTs were commonplace still, and when hybrids were what people who voted for John Kerry drove. The new CPUs at the time were, like say the Athlon 64 and the Pentium D and that kind of stuff. When it was discontinued, smartphones with big screens were mainstream. Everything had an HDMI port. Windows 10 was the new version of Windows, with lots of people still on 7. And the government really, really wants people to buy electric self-driving cars to save all the dolphins, to the point where they're pretty much pressuring car makers into building them. I mean, who cares if you'd have as much freedom as an Uber with a self-driving car? Because it's 2017, and if you don't like it, well, you're a Luddite. Because who cares if there's problems? It's progress. Oh, did I mention that NSA spying is now a thing, and our society is almost a parody of itself? The Xbox 360 was unique in the sense that it got system updates to add in more features, including party chat, 1080p support, a new boot animation, multiple main menu redesigns, avatars, removing Microsoft points and replacing them with real currency, and more. Understandably, gaming changed a lot, and by the end of the Xbox 360's lifespan, games went from being like PS2 original Xbox games, but with better graphics and frame rates, to being loaded with microtransactions and horse armor DLC packs. And this meant that many changes in gaming took places well during this gen, along with lots of cultural changes. One such change that happened was the whole rise of games that pandered real hard to this trapped in the 1990s demographic, and I think what best illustrates this was Microsoft's digital-only game service, Xbox Live Arcade. At first, Microsoft mostly used this for re-releases of retro arcade games and casual games, like, say, the PopCap games and whatnot. However, later on, the service became known for the release of retro 8-bit indie games, and this style of game became as hard to kill as those invasive vines that just swallow up buildings. While many of them were made by indie developers either obsessing over the past or who wanted something easier to make than 3D models, there were specific games made specifically to pander to these people by bigger companies. Scott Pilgrim the Game and Mega Man 9 and 10 were good examples of this. See, these were games that were released by big studios and made to pander to those who obsessed over the past, with one being based on a reference field movie and the other being based on old NES games, regressing from the graphics seen in Mega Man 7, 8, and the X series. But nerds bought them because they reminded them of their childhood, because nothing fills the hole in your heart like purchasing lots and lots of retro-inspired video games, even if you never play them, even if you just have them sitting there, right next to those Star Wars posters. And while this continues to this day, another more aggressive trend has been both remasters and remakes. Now, remasters are usually ports of older games to newer consoles running at higher frame rates, while remakes are either versions of these with massively improved graphics but the same engine and quirks, such as the Halo Master Chief Collection, or the older games were done on newer engines, such as the Pokemon remakes or that new System Shock remake coming out. Quite oftentimes you'll see these terms used interchangeably, however. Now, this is not a new trend, and ever since at least the 90s there have been remade or enhanced versions of games, with older consoles featuring games such as Super Mario All-Stars, Tempest 1000, Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, the Resident Evil remake, Metal Gear Solid, The Twin Snakes, Conquer Live and Reloaded, the Sega CD port of Snatcher, some of the Shin Megami Tensei ports like the Sega CD or PS1 version, Metroid Zero Mission, and some of the titles in the Sega Ages series. However, lately, ever since the rise of this whole trend of remaking everything for the sake of it, this has meant that the Xbox 360 and PS3 have had more collections and remakes than ever, and there's also been an increasingly large amount of hype for these remakes. Remakes that are a perfect sale to a disillusioned demographic, and nerds who just like to microwave more Hot Pockets, or if they're rich, drink Soylent while browsing weird internet porn in between gaming sessions to drown out their depression. either from the news that someone else got elected, or from the fact that just like Chris Chan, reality is going to catch up with them, just like it kind of has with Chris Chan already. However, at the same time, there are quite a few major flaws I have with these remakes and remastered, and I'd like to talk about all of them. However, at the same time, there are quite a few major flaws I have with these remakes and remasters, and I'd like to talk about all of them. Now, the first one is, quite oftentimes, a remake can be pretty mediocre. Not all of these are bad, but you have games which aren't that well ported, and you have games like Zone of the Enders HD with frame rate issues at best, and disasters like the Master Chief Collection or COD 4 Remastered at worst. For example, the Master Chief Collection absolutely nailed the single player for the most part, aside from some glitches that weren't in the originals, and they even based them on the same exact engines. The multiplayers were another story, being absolutely unplayable at launch, and even now they have bugs, lag, and balance issues. Keep in mind, it was so bad that eventually they made an announcement that the original 360 versions of ODST, Halo 3, Halo Anniversary, and Halo 4 were going to be playable on the Xbox One. And I've heard that possibly Halo 2 is going to be on there as well. I didn't hear them say much about Halo 2, but at this point it would not shock me at all. In fact, part of me feels that the whole remaster trend is capitalizing on the fact that only one of the three consoles that you can run in and buy at Walmart currently are backwards compatible. The PS4 is almost entirely not compatible with older titles, with the PS2 digital library being tiny compared to that of the PS3, zero PS1 games being on the PS4, and no support for any old discs whatsoever. The Nintendo Switch doesn't even pretend to be backwards compatible, with no backwards compatibility with either physical discs or the virtual console feature from the older systems. The Xbox One is the only system backwards compatible, and both select disc and digital games will work on it. Yet when the Xbox One was new, it didn't support 360 games at all, despite this being a highly requested feature, and it did take some time for the more popular games to show up, such as Call of Duty Black Ops 2 or Halo Reach. After another surprise announcement, Microsoft also announced original Xbox game support and said that games would be able to system link across all three Xbox consoles. However, at the same time, it's only one out of the three consoles that supports this, and many games still aren't on the Xbox One, like Call of Duty 4 or Modern Warfare 2, for example. Another major problem is that quite oftentimes, games that keep the gameplay 100% intact can possibly fall victim to the original game not aging that well in the first place. Remember when I said lots of gamers are blinded towards nostalgia from certain periods? Well, this warps their perception of some video games with titles such as Sonic Adventure 2, Modern Warfare 2, or Halo 2 being massively overrated and featuring extra exaggerated reputations. Except then when you go to play them, you realize, man, I gave this game another chance, but I just don't get what people say is so great about the game. You know what? It was never great. People just have nostalgia for the past. This means that when gamers play these overhyped games, that they will have problems like bad controls, unbalanced gameplay, or lag, and these problems will hit these gamers like a brick when they fire it up and realize that they're obsessing over their memories of this game from the past, or secondhand memories, and not over the game itself. After all, why else do you think that these gamers only revisited it when a remake came out? It's like when they shut down Halo 2. People who were playing other games suddenly got back on their Xbox to play it one last time, and then moved on instead of, say, installing X-Link Kai and LAN tunneling their Xbox. In fact, this brings up a good point. Don't you ever notice how gamers are the kind of people who want something right away, to the point where anything that requires LAN tunneling or custom servers loses popularity? At the same time, if you change the games a bit too much without giving players an opportunity to play it the old way, you'll alienate people who want to play it the old way. Because, after all, Modern Warfare 2 does have its fans, after all, and so does Sonic Adventure 2. However, perhaps the biggest flaw is this. See, this whole remake trend inhibits creativity in an industry that's already suffering from unpleasable gamers and rehashed trash. You've got two kinds of gamers. You've got ones that'll eat up literally any pile of trash that comes out, especially if it has a certain brand name. And then you have overly cynical gamers who are critical of anything made past their golden years that doesn't specifically pander to them. Game studios have found that brand names and remakes of old games sell and generate hype, and that anything that's a remake or remaster is going to sell well and bring in easy cash. However, at the same time, brand names, especially with long-running franchises, means that a game has to fit into a specific mold to be accepted. And if a game does not fit in this mold, then it won't be well received by fans of it. Just look at Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. If the words Call of Duty weren't on the box and it was called something else, it might have been better received by gamers, as it would have drawn in a different player base. However, by putting Call of Duty on the box, it was attracting a very specific type of fraghead, one that wanted specific gameplay, and due to this, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare was hated by Call of Duty diehards who wanted less fast-paced arena-style movement and more 360 no-scopes and camping behind corners. This also meant that a lot of people who never play Call of Duty were turned off from the game as well, because the second they see Call of Duty on the box, they're going to assume that it's one of those games that the cool kids at school play and not them, you know, the ones who bullied them, and that it was like, or that it was like Halo or Grand Theft Auto ruining video game and taking attention away from those perfect Nintendo video games. However, Pokemon stays the same, and it sells millions and millions of games, with fans eating it up like it's the new Madden. Remakes are the same idea. You take a game that everyone hypes up, re-release it, and watch as the money rolls in. While a new game entirely, especially a sequel, has a chance of being panned, a remake is the easiest and safest way to ensure easy money and at least an 80 from Metacritic, at the very minimum. And there are plenty of studios that you can pay to port your game over to a new system for little money. Unless it's a really bad port, which mostly seems to happen with multiplayer-centric re-releases, such as Call of Duty Modern Warfare Remastered or Halo Master Chief Collection, or it has a lot of changed content to the point where it's no longer like the original game. Let's be honest. Who is going to care if there's even a minuscule difference? It requires less effort than digging up an older game system when you can rebuy your game and pop it in your brand new PS4 or Xbox One, or buy it on Steam and play it again. And the best part is, studios know you have nostalgia for it. They know people keep begging them for the past all the time, even when they're making good games. And judging by how the current console generation started with ports and definitive editions, they're getting complacent, and it kinda sucks. I mean, sure, I get it. Anything after the first console you bought sucks. And let's be honest here, the Xbox One and PS4 have libraries that are unusually weak, especially compared to last gen. And the Wii U is a sad, desolate wasteland. But staying trapped in 1995 doesn't fix too many things, and I don't mean this in some pretentious political manner like some Polygon journalists would either. You want to change this? Simple. Go buy Game Maker or download the Unreal Engine or Unity and make your own game. Maybe learn C if you're still obsessed with optimization and long for the good old days of coding. Play some classic games that still hold up today pretty well. And no, don't just play Nintendo stuff. Play some more obscure consoles and games. See what they did right and what they didn't do. Don't waste your time at some bullshit college taking a game design course, which will get you nowhere except, student loan debt and flipping burgers at Wendy's. Maybe find some partner to help you. And don't be the ideas guy, because nobody wants to work with them. And this is a lot easier if you're some basement-dwelling furry, because chances are you'll have at least one artist friend. Go ahead. Make something original instead of just another platformer. And remember, your game has to have gameplay or it'll flop harder than Sunset did. And don't get caught in the nostalgia trap because 8-bit games are too oversaturated right now. And let's be real, there's too many retro-influenced games out there right now that simply don't stand out. Oh, and here's one last thing. Here's a cheat code for real game devs for instant success. Put anthropomorphic animals in your game and every furry will eat your game up like candy. Try this and maybe I'll see you on the Steam charts. All in all, have a nice day, and thanks for watching.